Hi there, welcome. My name is Finn. I'm absolutely delighted to be with you guys today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you also to the Stronger team. Thank you for the invite and just love being here. And every day I've been getting the updates. I see kind of quality speaker after quality speaker being announced for the week, for the day on social media, and some huge names been sharing insights. So I'm honoured to be able to add my own voice to this. I believe this is the last day. I think this is the last day of the conference. So exciting times, and I hope you've been following along. I hope you've been learning lots and have gleaned some real helpful wisdom from what you've heard. I know I have, and so just honestly delighted to be here. I'd love to know if you're watching live. By all means, please do. I've just in the chat. This is the last day. Confirmation from Stronger Network. Thank you. But yeah, if you're watching live, we'd love to kind of hear from you. So by all means, just kind of say hi and where you're watching from in the country, in the world. It'd be great to hear from you. Also, we do have the ability to ask questions. So if you want to drop a question in there, I'm more than happy to kind of pick up on those towards the end of the session. I've entitled the session today, Taking Church Social Media from Reactive to Strategic. It feels like it's been a reactive kind of year, 18 months for many, many churches. I'm sure you probably have been in that position yourself. It feels like we've had to adjust and adapt to the things that are going on around us. But it also feels like we're beginning to find a little bit of our feet. Feels like we're beginning to understand kind of where we're at and how things are leveling out. And so I hope this session is helpful in that regard. My plan is this will be highly strategic. I want to give you 3 kind of key areas that I would suggest digging into, but also I want it to be practical. I want you to have kind of clear takeaways, stuff to implement going forwards. That will make a difference in your online presence as a church, as a ministry, as an organization. And obviously I'm going to speak predominantly about social media, but I'm going to dip into kind of all areas of digital. Let me set the scene a little. I work for an organization called Digital Church Toolkit, and I've been personally involved in church communications and digital marketing now for over a decade. That makes me feel old. So I live in rural Suffolk, which definitely has its limitations digitally, and hopefully my stream quality is holding up. Personally, I'm married. I've got 2 young kids, but I'm deeply passionate about helping people to think digitally, to build strategically, and to unlock innovation. And so I hope that's what this session does for you. Now, if you're watching live, great, so delighted. Thank you for tuning in. But I recognise a lot of you probably be catching up, and so I hope this is useful for you. So my experience from much of my career has been attempting and imploring churches to take digital seriously, to see it as strategic ministry tool, to see it as something that is useful for both reaching and evangelizing, but also discipling, and to see the increasing weight of importance put on these platforms by both the current generation, but also I think kind of generations to come. And then of course the pandemic hit, and overnight everything sort of changed. So overnight the global church went from digital skepticism to digital reliance. Online tools became the only real way for us to share our message and to ensure continuity of our communities. So in my session outline, I sort of put this in. I said 2020 saw mass migration to online church due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we're now almost a full year on from that moment. So what have we learned? What should our priorities be? What is our next best step? That's my aim from this session. And so I really hope that that comes across and is useful for you today. So I hope that in 2020, you were given grace and space, permission to experiment, to try our best, to get something, anything off the ground. Many of you that are watching this, I know will kind of be over that area, that whether that's a job role, whether you're a volunteer, or whether you were just kind of the nearest person that was just like, hey, can you help us? Can you do something? Many of you watching this will have gone from 0 digital presence, basically nothing. You may have had a Facebook page, but that's about it. You might have had a website that was maybe a little outdated, but then you've gone almost completely overnight to being a completely digital expression of church. And of course that's dipped and waned and altered and changed as we've been able to meet and not meet, and sort of things have changed, I know, but we've had to be very reactive to the situation. We've had to throw out years of experience building church around a Sunday in-person event, and we've had to find a way to create church throughout the week and across an array of different platforms and tools. So I guess that's probably where a lot of you have been. 2020 was a year, it was a blank page to a degree. It was blue sky thinking. There was a level of freedom, I think, that came with it, which is like, we can't do the stuff we've always done. So kind of, the world's your oyster in a degree. It's like whatever we can get out there is good because it's better than nothing. And so I think probably a few of you will have felt that that are watching this. So what do we do? How do we do it quickly? How do we do it effectively? But I think now is the time to begin to consolidate, to take stock, and to build strategy that will help lead us forwards to reach new people and to minister to our church. So yeah, I've put that, 2020 was a permission to experiment. We were reactive. 2021, this is our time. This is our moment, I think, to now begin to take stock, what's working, what's not working, and to begin to build strategy, pushing us forwards, for hopefully kind of years to come, setting a good foundation for that. So my first strategic shift is to measure, analyze, and adapt. My experience with churches is we're not great at this, and we've got to know where our resources are applied. At a very basic level, it's stewardship. It's knowing that where the resources we are spending, where the time we're spending is going, and whether it's not it's effective. So I hope for many of you at least, this kind of first strategic shift that I'm talking about is more of a reminder of the value of what you're already doing. And I guess if this is fresh information, if this is the first time you thought, oh yeah, I wonder if what we're doing actually is working, maybe this is a bit of a wake-up call. Maybe this is a bit of fresh thinking that hopefully pushes you forwards. But if you've done a full year almost of online church, but have no idea other than the kind of anecdotal conversations that you might be having, whether or not anyone's tuning in, whether people are taking steps forwards in terms of discipleship, how engaged people feel with it, how engaged people are with their faith, with Jesus. This is your reminder to make time to find this stuff out. And I know the world is busy, and I know that the idea of creating, another job on the to-do list is not appealing in the slightest. But I think this is so important, and I think it's something that should be high on our priority list. And so this is my encouragement to you to start thinking that way. I think, for me, this is one of the top reasons to think digitally in our approach. Digital offers clean, honest, real-time data. Sometimes it's too honest. It will tell you when things are working and when they're not, and it is brutal at times. Trust me, I speak from personal experience. It will tell you when something's failed in black and white. There's no denying it. But personally, I would take that over the kind of ambiguity of, I think people kind of liked it. I think it's kind of working. We've got some people tuning in. I think that's good. I think the black and white of, hey, last week we had 50 people tuned in. This week we've got 20. And those numbers are heading in the wrong direction. I think that honesty is useful. So it's worth considering. It's worth considering how we measure, how we analyze, and how we adapt. Every platform, every digital platform comes with some form of analytics built in for free. They wildly vary in quality and extent of the information shared, but they will all offer you something. And analytics are how you know whether you're winning or losing on social media, particularly. So if you are putting time and energy and effort into your social media feed, if you are ensuring that you are putting out content regularly, maybe it's just me, maybe it's just who I am as a person, but I want to know whether that's succeeding or not. I want to know whether I'm winning on that, and whether I'm making a difference in people's lives, and whether the content is actually landing, or whether there'd be a better way of doing that. And so I think that's where analytics allow you that. So, some questions to consider. Are you growing? Are you reaching your intended audience? I don't probably have time to go into audience as an idea now. It's a conversation I and we as Digital Church Toolkit have with churches a lot. To speak bluntly, like, you have an audience whether you've chosen it or not. And so are they intended audience? Are you reaching people you want to be reaching, or are you not? Analytics also help you make better strategic decisions. So, questions like that I followed this up with: what platforms should you be using? What topics should you be speaking into? What type of content should you be posting? I think these are questions we all need to be asking. I'm not going to run through, how to for every platform and how you would dig into the analytics for that today. I am more than happy to kind of give insight and share what I know about that, of course. But I think for today, what we need to consider is, what success looks like. what's a win for your church? And maybe, you know, when I used that example a minute ago of, you know, 50 people tuned in, that feels wildly aspirational. You know, you're lucky if you get 20 every week. But, you know, setting that as a, hey, by the end of the year, we want to be up to 30 or 40, you know, setting that and then measuring it and knowing whether you're on track with that goal, I think is really a great strategic decision you can make. And ensure you're tracking the right details. I think for most of us, particularly on social media, for 99% of you, I'm going to go with your key data point should be engagement. It doesn't really matter how many people you're reaching if they're not taking steps to actively engage with your organization, with your message, ultimately with Jesus. There was a great session from Emma Sijuade. She was talking about building an engaged community earlier in this conference, and I would highly recommend checking it out. She's shared some great insights, and yeah, just quality stuff. So if you want to deep dive on engagement, how to build engagement, how to ensure that your posts engage more highly, that's a session I would 100% worth checking out. It's also just, you know, there's no point analyzing, you know, and measuring what you're doing if you're unwilling to make adjustments. The adapt part of that is so important. You have to utilize the data with your approach, and yeah, you have to hold your approach kind of lightly with that. You know, it might need to change. Don't ask questions if you don't plan on adapting based on the responses received. It feels very fundamental, feels very simple, but again, my experience is that often at times we kind of forget that side of things. I'm going to speak from personal experience, but I think the most crippling statement that I hear from churches is, well, we've always done it this way. And I think that's a dangerous mindset to have. I think ultimately, you know, you want to submit it all to the will of Christ. You want to be following Jesus' call for your church 100%. But I think in the day-to-day, you can allow the data to help guide you in that, to see whether people are resonating with that, how people are reacting to it. So that's strategic shift number one. It's measure, analyze, and adapt. Strategic shift two is a digital first mindset. So I spoke a bit at the start about the fact that we, over the last little while, kind of my role really with churches has been trying to convince them and assist them to see digital as a useful asset. And I think the last year has forced us to think digitally. It's forced us to move online, and it's forced us to find routes online that will reach people and make a difference. But yeah, how do we hold on to that? How do we adapt from there? Where do we go from here? Where do we build strategy around that? So, you know, the past year has opened up accessibility to church like never before. And I think that's really important that we, you know, spend some time camped out in this idea. Christianity and the church is more accessible than ever here in the UK. So the reality is that digital allows us to be a 24/7, 365 organization. We can be available and present in people's life all the time, and we can be feeding people, we can be discipling them, we can be helping them take steps in faith more than ever we have before. So I'm here to suggest that digital should not be a minor section of your strategy to live out the Great Commission, but I think it should be your first port of call. It should be the bedrock of your approach. Now, of course, I'm going to say that's the area in which I work and I'm involved in, and I know there's a reality there. You know, so I see my bias in that. Don't get me wrong, but I think there's a reality that we have often seen digital as a method for getting a message out there. So that's not probably new thinking for a lot of you, that the youth ministry will want to publicize their events. They want to get the word out there. The women's ministry, again, maybe running events. So as each ministry is putting on events and running activities, you're going to want to try and market it to people, essentially. probably not the terminology you'd use, but that's the reality. I'm here, I think, to say, well, no, I am here to say that I think digital is a ministry in its own right. And actually that through digital platforms, particularly social media, you can minister to people, you can grow them in faith, and ultimately you can help them find faith in their first place. You can use that as a real evangelical tool. So yeah, I think it should be the bedrock of your approach. Many of you have made the move online. You've felt the benefits of this, so even in your congregation, I am sure there are people that are reaching out and just saying thank you, like this past year has been amazing. So those that work shifts that previously are like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to attend church this whole month because the way my shifts work, it just might not line up that I can make Sunday at 10 o'clock or whenever your service is. I might not be able to make Wednesday at 8 p.m. or whenever your groups run. Those that are unwell or bedridden, can still attend church. And there's been so many stories, from that community that have come out there, particularly those with disabilities, those that find accessing content physically difficult, that maybe can't be too far away from home for too long. That whole demographic of people are now accessing church like never before, have never felt more connected to church than before. And I was recently on a conference, and there's a Vineyard conference, and Mark Crosby, head of communications for UK and Ireland, was speaking, and he gave a story from his own church of a lady who's really struggled to connect with church over the last little while due to an illness. Since the pandemic hit, she has not missed a single event. She's been at every Sunday, she's been at every group, and feeling more connected than ever. So if that in itself is not a good reason, I think we're missing something there. We are more accessible than ever. People are accessing church like never before. So I think when you boil it down, this is a personal definition. It might work for you, it might not. But I think church is community and content focused on Jesus. I think we can break it down, and of course we do way more than that. But I think the reality is those are the two huge constituent parts of what makes church. It's community, it's people focused, of course it is, it's pastoral, but also it's content. It's delivering something that's helpful for people, that moves them forward, that helps them connect with faith, ultimately with Jesus. So the pandemic's taught us that content can be delivered digitally. We'll come on to community because that's been difficult. And I know there'll be a lot of you that feel that way. The content side of thing, we're fine with. We can deliver on a Sunday. We've found ways, we've found opportunities to, think midweek and to take that content and ensure that it's being delivered. Community's been harder. There's no two ways about it. Like creating a sense of community in digital spaces doesn't always work. So, and I'm going to pick up on that a bit later in this session. So I'm not going to talk too much about that. But despite those positives, despite everything I've just spoke about, all the amazing opportunity that digital is giving us, despite all we've learned, many of us are clinging on to a mindset of prioritizing the in-person. Now, I think for some elements of church, this is fair. And I get it. I live it. Do you know what I mean? So for worship and encounter, particularly, there's nothing like being in a room with, other people, lots of other people, also healing and baptism, being together, being physically able to baptize people, being physically able to lay on hands, that makes a difference. And I'm aware there's no real digital alternative right now, although, there are ways that people experimenting are finding amazing ways to do this. And also, ultimately, let's not kind of limit God's power in that. Like, again, I've heard amazing stories of churches doing online prayers, Zoom calls for healing, and that have seen healing in those spaces. So, like, phenomenal. But digital offers us a wealth of opportunities and amazing ways of reaching people like never before. So what if we flipped the narrative? What if ministries, events, and activities were established digitally first? And then over time, when possible, when appropriate, at the moment with the pandemic all around us, we began to create in-person variations, ways that would complement and suit that. What if our sermons or our series were based and planned around a digital audience? If you're in the room and you're able to be part of it, and we're in a scenario where that's allowed and legal, fine. But we address and we tailor our content to the multitudes online, the people that we are reaching online, which by and large, from what I'm hearing, far outstrips the amount of people we would ever be able to fit in a room. And, I think it makes digital makes invitation so much more simple. Before, when you break it down, it's madness. Our invitations historically to church events would have been, okay, could you come to a certain location on a certain day at a certain time? And it's got to be that time because we only meet, a few times that day, to sit kind of uncomfortably surrounded by people you don't know, half listen to what's going on, while at the same time you're worrying that you're doing the right thing and standing at the right time and saying the right thing, singing and sitting at other times. It's a hard sell. I can't believe we actually got people to come. But how much more uptake, how much more interest and growth would we see? And are you seeing currently in an invitation that says, hey, I'd love you to tune into this whenever you're free, from the comfort of your own home. I think this message could change your life if you make the space to connect properly with it without distraction. Take some time. It's going to be like half an hour max, and just connect with it and see how it works for you. That is a much simpler invitation. That makes church, accessibility rocket, in my opinion. And I'm sure many of you will have seen this. So I think this is not a new kind of statement from us as Digital Church Toolkit. It's something we've been banging on about for a while, but we have to shift away from a Sunday only focus. And again, seen some churches do this in amazing ways where they shift towards more of a Netflix style kind of on-demand content provision that grows faith, disciples people as individuals. Let's go back to the text. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is the model that Jesus used in person. That would be my belief around this. He had a core message. He spoke very generally. Of course he did, because you and I still relate to what he said today. But he also tailored his message directly to individuals. He used metaphors from their world. He used stories to communicate his truth. And he even built, the whole premise of what he's trying to say through a narrative and through a story. But we might not be able to do that right now, but we can use online content for the benefit of our audience. We can create and curate content that is going to reach people in a way that in person and on one day of a week, maybe a couple of times a day, just isn't going to reach people. That's the reality. So I've got another question for you. So if so far you're like, cool, yeah, you're on board, maybe some of this you're already doing, you're already kind of working through, and it's not even necessarily new stuff to you. You're like, yeah, great. First of all, that's so cool. I love that, that this is, there's churches that are thinking this way already. That is honestly brilliant. My question, the next one, is this though: how are we serving and discipling our digital only attendees? Do you even recognize digital only attendees as a valid sector of your congregation? Because I'm sure if you are doing online services, there's a reality in which you have picked people up that have never, they've only started coming to church in the last year, however long it's been, 18 months, whatever, and they might have never been to an in-person proper church event. They might only know your church from the stream online that you do on a Sunday, or from the content that you put out midweek on a Wednesday evening, for example. If someone, or is someone, sorry, who attends an online group and tunes in every Sunday, but never plans on attending your church, your venue in person, are they part of your church? I think we have a duty to consider this. I think, we are putting this content out there. We are wanting to reach people. We're wanting to tell them about Jesus. We want to, ensure that we equip them for faith, that we build them up. And we have an obligation to lead them and to help them connect with the church, capital C, in some way. Now, again, let's go back to it. I think there is something utterly invaluable about meeting in person. There's something you can get from that experience that you just will not be able to recreate online. So of course I would always encourage people to do that, but can someone have faith? Can someone be part of your church and never attend anything in person, just purely tune in and follow the steps, do take the actions you're saying? If your call to action at the end of your service is, hey, we need to get back into the Bible, we need to be reading that more regularly, cool, they'll do that. They'll be praying, they'll be connecting with people online, so they'll be building friendships and community. They might be kind of Zoom calling or video calling or FaceTiming, so they're building up a community, they're encouraging, they're being held accountable, they might have pastoral calls. Are they part of your church? I think it's a key thing to consider. And if they are, how are you going to serve them? How are you going to equip them? How are you going to disciple them? How are you going to move them forwards in faith? So it's a big question. And I think it's something we should be considering, but it's a key component that we need to be thinking about if we are going to really take this second strategic shift seriously and move to a digital first mindset. Hey, I'll leave that one with you. Our next strategic shift 3 is community over content. So I just mentioned, we just had a whole section about digital first, and I also mentioned several times, I recognize digital has its limitations, obviously, especially when it comes to those physical touch points. And so for that reason, I think we need to prioritize community over content, friendship over followers, and people over platforms. The church is great at sound bites, at proclamations. We love using social media as a soapbox. We love kind of getting on there and saying, hey, this is what we believe and this is why we believe it. And don't get me wrong, absolutely nothing wrong with that. However, I guess my question would be, what if we started announcing, what if instead of announcing stuff to people, we built community with people? And I think that is really our calling as the church. That should be where we are in our sweet spot. We are nailing it because that's what we do, right? We build community with people. We introduce them to the community with Jesus, with the the Holy Spirit, and that's our role. However, my reflections would be online that we are far better at just making announcements and making proclamations than we are about starting dialogue, building conversation with people online. Social media usage has never been higher. I've been hearing and kind of even in places reading about this narrative of kind of screen time burnout, or digital fatigue is the word of the moment. I feel it, don't get me wrong, and there's definitely a reality of like the Zoom burnout, of like just back-to-back meetings, which are hard work because you have to work harder because you're doing everything through a screen. I think there's a reality to that, but I'm sorry, data from the past year shows that people are using social media more. So if that's your kind of, if you've seen a massive drop off on social media, or the church's social media, like, people are getting kind of burnt out of the digital, like, I'm sorry, like the data just doesn't back that up. People are on social media more than ever. Digital appetites have increased, not decreased over this time. And so maybe they're just kind of looking elsewhere, and I'm going to touch on that in a second. So our role as a church is to fill people's feed with something wholesome, something positive, but moreover, in a sea of brands and organizations and individuals just shouting about themselves, wanting to kind of build themselves up, make themselves look good, I would love us, the church, to stand out from the crowd by showing an interest and a love for others, by being other focused rather than self-focused. This is what we're doing. These are the events we're putting on. This is what we believe. Nothing wrong with it. I just don't think that's really what we're called to as a church. Our calling is, hey, who are you? I want to get to know you. I want to connect with you. I want to find out more about you. You have value. You have importance, not only to me, but ultimately to God. So yeah, that's my challenge to us. Could we start building community rather than just announcing? Particularly over the past year, after the past year, people are tired, people are weary, people are running on empty. And so I think, the request I would have of you is to not keep asking from them, but instead to give value to them. And it's very easy to think that when we say our stuff, that when we talk about what we're doing, we're giving value. We're like, hey, we're running an alpha course. Like we love alpha. Alpha is phenomenal. It is great. You should come along to it. We feel like that's a value piece, but actually when you dig into it, we're asking something from them. We're like, you've got to come to something. You've got to tune into this. We want you to do something. And so trying to find those pieces which are genuinely valuable to your audience, that's the key. That's the key. And so again, going back to our first strategic shift, if we're measuring, if we're analyzing, we're going to see where people are resonating with content. We're going to see where people are finding something that adds value to their life and helps them. And there we can double down on it. That's where we can adapt, and we can say, hey, that's the stuff that works. That's the stuff that we're being church, we're building people up, we're encouraging them, we're connecting them with a faith that is generous and adds to their life. That's my challenge to you. There is an increasing need for the church to be proactive and not reactive. We want to invite people into a conversation. We need to reach out with a pastoral heart to meet people in isolation and loneliness with good news. I think it's time to break through the wall of indifference, of apathy, and to hit them with something that complements the conversation, that genuinely helps them. It's easy to think, I know there'll be people watching this that you're part of a smaller UK church. You might be the only person that has any kind of say or input or adds anything to the social media kind of conversation. You might be a very small congregation. You might be an older congregation where kind of social media is just not kind of part of the common parlance. So it's very easy for us to think as those kind of smaller UK churches that adding value is only for those big churches, the more equipped churches. But I actually think some small churches, I think we as small churches, have tools that can add huge value now, huge value. So let me just chat about a couple of those. So yeah, sorry, we said that. We want to be personal, maximize the personal. If you're a small church, this should be so easy. And I don't want to be blasé about it, but that's the reality. Because if you're only interacting with a couple of people, and if you're only like new people, fringe people, people that are like, oh, I'm kind of curious about this whole church thing, I've got questions about faith. If you're a small church, the reality is, you might only get one of those a week, one of those a month. One person that's like, hey, I'm kind of curious in this. So therefore, you've kind of got no excuse for being ultra personal with them. Like, you've got one person to deal with in a month. So, interacting back and forth, maximizing that personal touch, getting to know them, getting to know, okay, what's your question? Why have you got this question? Tell me more. Like, what's your background? What's your history? Where's that coming from? The ability to be personal is free. It takes time. Don't get me wrong. Time is money. So is it really free? I get it. But also, if you're there and you have a heart to reach people through social media, you can be personal so easily. You don't need to be a big church. You don't need to have multiple members of staff. You can deal with it. You can do it. We also need to leverage local. If you're a small church, think back to the days about the parish church. You may be a parish church. Back in the day, they were like the hub of the community. Everything happened. Everything went through the church. If you want to find out what was going on in the village or the town or the local area, you go to the church notice board. Like, that was where things happened. That's where conversations happened. That's where businesses were formed. That's where, deals were done even. And I think kind of we need to rekindle that spirit online. I love the idea, and I've seen it done. I've seen it done brilliantly by churches where they become the kind of local hub for places. Facebook groups are a fantastic way of doing this. Churches that run the local Facebook group, and so of course in there you'll get all sorts of stuff going on, and kind of how you monitor that, and how you kind of what you interact with and what you choose to step away from, I think is a key consideration with that. But being the point of reference of like, hey, when's that street festival thing happening? Probably not at the moment during a pandemic, but what I'm saying. We go to you, the church, first for that insight, because you are just that local hub. I think that has huge power. Again, so if you're small, if you're rural, this is not harder for you. This should be easier for you, because you have that voice, you have that ability, and you have less people to have to deal with, arguably. So yeah, let's rekindle that spirit online. I think referencing local places of interest to your content is a great way to leverage the local side of things. If you're filming pieces at the moment for your church online, if you're filming messages from your pastors for the church, you're not able to make those big announcement in the building, so you're kind of filming stuff and then sending it out, your reverend, your preacher, whatever your church context is, why not film that in front of a recognizable landmark in your area? It doesn't need to be inside in someone's home in a studio. Obviously you've got to think about social distancing and how you do that, and whether you're kind of within regulations, but to walk down to a local hill, billboard, crossing, something just that anyone in that locality is going to be like, I know that place, I know exactly where that is. Using those recognizable landmarks, name dropping, local businesses without being dismissive or cliquey for those that don't understand what that is, so using your language well to unpack that, but picking up on that. So again, if you're if you can't get out there to a local place, but you're talking about, let's say, Jesus walking on water, but you could like reference a local lake, a local body of water, and be like, oh, I imagine it's just like such and such lake, or whatever is in your locality. And so for those that are watching that are like, hey, that's right down the road from me, I can see that from my window, do you know what I mean? It's like you are embedding yourself in that locality, you're becoming a trusted voice there. And I think it's a great way of building community online. So kind of two key ways, even if you're a small church, that you can maximize your ability to build conversation, build community, I think is maximize the personal, leverage local, and that's why I put them on there. I think the key here is creating time, strategically creating time, and I've kind of said it already. I'm sure I'm going to have to pick up on it again in today's session, but if you value something, you make time for it. You say no to everything else, and you make sure it happens. Yeah, I can tell what you value by looking at your diary. It's very simple, isn't it? And I think, yeah, so making time to do this stuff is so important. And I know, and I live it, so I get it. When you live in that space of like, I just don't know when I'm going to have the time to do this. There actually is something else I might have to drop. You might have to say no to something else in order to make this happen. And I suppose that's the question is, if we're going to take social media from reactive to strategic, what are we willing to invest in that? What time are we willing to put into that? What money are we willing to put into that? I think, we're going to take this seriously. And I think if we're not taking it seriously now, when it's the only way we're able to really reach people, we're able to really disciple people is online, I'm not sure when we're ever going to take it that seriously. So it feels like now is the time to kind of be having this conversation. It feels timely that I'm able to share these points now with you. So, as you begin to consider what it looks like to open back up churches and to meet together, and, as maybe January, February is your time where you're kind of planning for the year and working out what the heck are we going to do, particularly this year. Yeah, I think a key point to throw in there at all times is going to be, well, again, going back to point 2, can we do this digitally first? Is there a way in which we can think digitally around this and ensure that we are bringing a digital element to this? But also, how can we leverage the online? How can we utilize that to do maybe what we've done before? And again, this conference is a great example of that. Historically, these sorts of conferences we've been meeting in large venues with lots of people, and we do it in person. We found a way around it. We think digitally. And I know for a lot of you, that's kind of the truth with church. It's like you've had to think digitally with church as you've been unable to meet. And now you've got to a point where you're like, probably wouldn't go back. Or if we would go back, it would look very different. And so I think that's why this is an important discussion to be having. I think creating the time for it and ensuring that it's a priority. Again, even like if you're a church and historically you were like, oh, we're going to look to appoint a new pastor, we're going to maybe you've got a job role that's coming up, something that you're going to hire into. My question to you would be like, does that have a digital element to the job description, and or should you be almost thinking, do we need that role right now? I had a conversation with a church just a couple of weeks ago. They had a community pastor, that was it, and they basically rewrote the job description. And we're like, this person is no longer a community pastor. They're now a digital pastor. And this was a person that was happy with that, wanted that, was skilled in that area. So it worked well. That might not work for you. But kind of long term, that's probably the thought and the process that we should be having in terms of, this is now so key, so important. Not only are we going to create time, we're going to take job opportunities around it. We're going to create roles around it. We're going to create serving opportunities for people. And that's another key area that's worth just very briefly touching on. How are you enabling people right now to serve? Because digital offers that. And again, if you're like, I ain't got time for this, I don't have the resources, like, is there a way you could bring people in? A lot of the conversations I have with people are those that are kind of one-person teams. They're they're actually the church admin or something, and they've just kind of been thrown this role of church social media. But the reality is, their kind of their dilemma is, how do I grow this? I'm so busy doing that I can't actually get people on board. And I think probably we need to think wider than we maybe have historically. We need to think, so does someone need to be part of your church? Do they even need to believe what you believe to be part of that digital team? And that's maybe for you a theological question as much as anything. But if there's someone in your village, in your town, someone someone you're friends with that's an amazing photographer, they don't go to church, they don't believe what you believe, but they're a phenomenal photographer and they're always out and about taking photos of your locality. I've just spoken about the need to leverage local, speak to them. Well, why can't you use their footage, their videos, their photos in your content? Could that become your social media content, that once a week you do like a local inspiration piece, and it's all based around creation and what God has done and built and made in our world, and that you share one of their photos? and that's kind of a bit of a curveball, it's a bit out there, but similarly, we often kind of pigeonhole serving roles digitally to be those that are young, those that are very technically able, and of course you need those people, I'm sure, but the reality is, like, there are people that are a completely different demographic that will offer you something that is very useful. And so again, the example I often use this, so you've heard me speak about anything, you've probably heard me say this before, but like, my experience is that the older generation, those older than me, are far better at writing than I am, or my generation is, let's put it that way. And I think it's probably something about the fact that we used to write by hand and actually think about what we're doing rather than kind of texting in shorthand. And I'm obviously making sweeping generalizations here, but that's my experience. Is that kind of older generation much better, much more articulate in what they write, much more compelling in what they write. And so I think a great way in which you can bring people in on that team is, could you approach 2 or 3 people to be essentially your copywriters, the people that write the text for your social media posts? They don't need to know anything about social media. They don't need to know, how that's going to work, where you're going to post it, why. But you just to say, hey, I'm wanting to write something that encourages people. I'm thinking of using this verse. Could you just write something around that? Could you write something that's going to build people up? I'm running an event and I'd love to I don't just want to say, hey, we're doing this thing online. I'd love to make that a bit more compelling. Could you write me some text around that I can use? And I might edit it down. I might not use all of it, but just having it there is going to be helpful for me. That's a great way of not only kind of taking something off your plate, but you've just empowered someone. You've just given them a role. They are part of a social media team. They probably never thought that was going to be the reality. But then and there, you've just kind of created something that works for all parties, grows people in faith, adds a connection to church. I think it's a beautiful thing. I think it's something we should be considering. So yeah, not only should we be creating time, I didn't put a slide off of this, but we should be creating team, and we should be building people up and around what we need and how we can do this, how we do this so that we can ensure maximum impact for your church. I know that many churches barely have time to post what they want to say. You're like, I can barely get out all the stuff that we want to say. But we have to create time. We have to make time to listen to what other people are saying. And again, that's something that for a lot of churches, we're just not doing. We need to listen to them. We need to encourage, we need to support those in our community. Again, that's the role of the church, right? That's kind of what we've done historically. So listening to followers, building teaching around their needs, being proactive, reaching out and listening to how people are feeling and communicating in a way that assists. Again, kind of being proactive, not just reactive. I had it on an earlier slide. I think that's such a key consideration. Not just kind of posting what we want to talk about, not just getting that out there, but actually following people. I mean, I had this question recently on a conference again, that someone was like, should we be following other people? 100%. Yeah, because what that shows is you are interested in those people, that you value those people, that you want to connect with other people in your locality. So yes, follow them. And then don't just follow them, like, be a person to them, be a friend, be a supporting arm around the shoulder. And, when they're posting, oh man, really tough day, comment on it as the church and say, I'm really sorry to hear that. I don't know you, we don't know each other, but I'm praying for you. How encouraging is that? If someone posts a photo that they've just got engaged or they're celebrating a birthday, as the church saying, hey, happy birthday, we're celebrating with you. I hope you have a fantastic day. Like that. I think those little moments are what builds and begins to build, a dialogue of, hey, this is an organization, this is a group of people that care, that are bothered about who I am, and it helps people connect with that community so much more simply. So again, I'm going to say it one last time, be proactive in your approach. Don't just wait, don't just sit and wait for them to come to you. Go out, be the church, disciple people, grow people, reach people with the message of Christ. I think it's so important. So I'm just going to quickly summarize. We've spoken about 3 strategic shifts, which I would love you to consider as we move forward. First of all, measure, analyze, and adapt. So know what's happening, what's working, what's resonating, and then adapt accordingly on social media. Ensure that the posts you're putting out there, ensure that the content you're creating is built on hard data, that this stuff works and is connecting with our community, not just kind of a whim and like, oh, I think it's working, I don't really know. Similarly, we want to move into that strategic shift of a digital first mindset. I'm really happy to have the discussion about it. I'll see if kind of questions have come in, or if people want to chat about this further. But I think having that mindset of, you know, that digital is the first place we're going to start from now on, no matter what's happening, no matter whether we can meet in person, that actually our first thought is how can we do this digitally, because we recognize that through that we're going to reach more people. How can we all content be on social media in a way that's going to connect with different age groups, and ensure that's our mindset first and foremost before we then think about how we then do the in-person. And then finally, we're going to choose community over content, and by that I mean we're basically going to choose others over ourselves. We're going to care less about our message and just kind of shouting from a soapbox, and we're going to be much more intentional about reaching people, reaching out into our community and caring for them and answering the questions. And through that we can share our message, through that we can share even scripture and key thoughts and key points that underpin our faith, but we're going to do that in a way that complements what they are going through and complements what they want to talk about, rather than just kind of proclaiming and just shouting that over people. Don't think it works. My time is almost through. I hope that for some of you these are helpful reminders and encouragements to continue and grow in what you're already doing. I'm sure for some of you these won't be new things. These will hopefully just be, hey, we're on the right track. For others this might be brand new thinking, and my prayer is that you can find a way to begin making these shifts as soon as possible. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for tuning in. Great to see the chat. Great to see so many of you here. Thank you. Maggie said that she's that one person administrator. Definitely been there, and speak to a lot of people that are in similar position. Thank you, Julie. Please, it's helpful. My email address is there. If you want to chat, if there's anything I said that you would like to know more about, if you kind of want to help with resources, point in the right direction, I'm really more than happy to make myself available for that. Email address is there, finn@digitalchurchtoolkit.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us. We'd love to see you soon. Goodbye.